Hello?
Hello.
Is this thing on finally? Hello? Hello? What's going on, Paint Liquor?
Hello, Paint Liquor.
Hi. Ghost Hunter.
Ghost Hunter. Hello.
Hello. How we doing
Probably
on this
being a
lovely
little
Tuesday? Back at it. Aloha nerds. What's going on, Source? Flapsack Nickeljack. Somebody named Monument
morning.
Hobbies. Who the heck is that? Jen's not typing. Do we have a ghost?
It's not me. It's not morning either.
Have we been hacked? Have we been hacked?
Did you fire the wet intro lady? What?
Excuse me?
I don't understand that question.
I was not at Monument Hobbies when that was a thing.
Yeah.
That predates me, I guess. The wet intro lady? Excuse me?
I don't know what this is.
Excuse me? Wad, what's going on? Hello, everybody. I hope your week has started off great. It is Tuesday. We're going to be continuing with more of Tiger L. Anthony. The legally distinct Lionel Johnson.
I mean, Anthony, though?
Yeah, Tony the Tiger.
Yeah.
Tiger L. Anthony.
Yeah.
No?
But Johnson. I was thinking of a comparable.
But it was Tony the Tiger.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
So we had to do it. So it's Tiger L. Anthony. Do not question the dad
How about
joke.
Le Tigre L. Anthony?
Le Tigre L. Anthony. Oh, God, I like that even better. I like that even better. Le Tigre L. Anthony. That's like a lot of languages mashed together. That
In the intro video, there's a song with a female voice that sounds like she's saying wet. And then it echoes. There's no lyrics in that video or in that song.
Yeah, there's no lyrics in it at all.
Oh.
Do you know?
One. I thought
There's no intro. Well, there's no music on the current one at all. They're talking about the old one, yeah.
we go straight into it.
Colonel, what's going on? Where's Jordan? Jordan's working.
There is. Go listen to it. Oh, I mean, I used to listen to it every day, pretty much, I think. Right?
I love that his name is literally Lion the Johnson. Yes. Lion the Johnson. Johnson the Johnson. This is Tony the Tigre. Legally distinct from Lion the Johnson. Although they look eerily similar, although not at scale.
I can't see that little one.
So, one of my favorite characters in the Warhammer lore is Tony the Tigre. Anthony the Tiger. By far. All right, so yesterday, if you look back at the VOD and the other video content that the wonderful Christopher Mac Sushi will have coming out here shortly, we went over and did some underpainting with the royal purple, bright yellow green, red oxide, and then advanced flesh tone to get the skin to where it's at now. And then we left off doing a little bit of dark golden brown on the hair. So we'll probably pick up doing a little bit more work on the hair to get some highlights laid in, maybe go back and forth on the skin. I'm really anxious to get started figuring out the armor color. So I don't know what we'll do today. We'll play around. We'll see.
Colonel said it should be El Tigre Tony. How about El Tigre Antonio? Or you can change the name to El Tigre Tiburcio. What does that mean? Tiburcio. I don't know that one. Source said, is his head too small or are his shoulder pads too big?
Yes. Yes. Sculptors doing Space Marines have a hard time with head size because I want you to just take a look real quick at his hand.
That's a really large hand.
That's a heck of a mitt
So
compared
he
to
does
his
have
face.
A very tiny head, it looks like.
I have okay sized hands, but I can't take my own head and use it as a basketball.
Yeah.
Tony the Tiger can definitely take his own head and use it as a basketball. But that's what happens when you become a Primarch.
He's an 80s businesswoman.
He does have the shoulder pads
We
for
were
it.
just talking about shoulder pads. The other
We
day. Why
were.
talking
We said
about
that you needed some so the dog could stand on your shoulder when
Oh,
we
that's
drive
right.
in the
Yeah,
car.
because in the car, Cora sits in the back seat, but
Yes.
she wants to get in the front, so she will put her
Yes.
paws on our shoulders.
Exactly.
It's terrible.
Exactly. It's hilarious.
Bud is watching the stream to avoid shoveling snow.
Seems like
We
a
are
good plan.
happy to provide a distraction for you, Bud.
Seems like a good plan.
You know what they say, big hands, big loyalty to the emperor.
We're going to take some dark golden brown and some golden brown and put them on the palette. Do some mixing.
Oh. Is it all connected?
What all connected?
Well, the screen I'm looking at, the keyboard just popped up. Christopher, are you typing right now?
It's that keyboard sometimes.
I didn't touch it. I'm not even anywhere close to it.
Might have disconnected.
Oh, that's funny.
It's all good.
All
This
right,
is
let's get
Poppy.
us punched in.
I don't know how to get that to go away. Oh, I guess I can maybe go like that. Oh, yeah. Why are you whining?
Do some initial color sketching on here. Again, when doing a model like this, I'm less concerned with blending everything nicely to start and more concerned with just getting color placed on the model, see what I'm liking, then kind of work it back and forth to get to my final destination, so to speak.
Flapjack said if we're doing the challenge review tomorrow, does that mean Fuse won't be there? I thought I heard you'd miss the stream tomorrow.
I will
That's
not be here
correct,
tomorrow.
yeah. Your brain wanted to say Pookie for some reason. So Jason calls Poppy and Cora and Poppy Turkey and the Shrimp. That's like their new crime-fighting duo name.
Cora is Turkey. She always
Turkey and the
has been.
Shrimp. Sitcom coming soon.
And now we have Shrimp.
Yeah.
I found myself just calling them both Turkey, and I didn't feel like that was fair to Cora. Cora's like, that's my name, Dad.
Yeah.
You know? So I was like, okay, well, I got to have a name for the little one, and she's little, so she's Shrimp. That's just the way it goes. So they don't get a vote. Nobody gets a vote in this. It's me and the way I want to do it.
Four Pig Bacon wants to know if you're going to do non-metallic plaid for the armor,
Of course. Why would I do anything else?
right?
Like, what kind of question is that? Like, don't you even know me?
Colonel said, stay safe, all affected by that big snowstorm. Is there a big snowstorm? I'm so out of the loop with world events right now.
Yeah, I think like Texas got hit with some stuff.
Texas?
Mhm.
What is happening in the world?
Well, there's a big winter front moving through the U.S., and so it's been hitting from the Midwest and down into Texas and all sorts of stuff.
Camology said, stuck at work for the next hour. What's on the agenda for today on the bust?
Doing some hair right now. A little bit of golden brown, dark golden brown mixed together to give me a good mid-tone color in there.
Swifter Bear said, it sounds like we have some tech glitches. Is that today?
We have what?
Tech glitches?
No?
I don't know.
Do we?
No, I don't see any.
Oh, the keyboard thing?
Oh, maybe?
Oh,
Maybe commenting about what you were
Gotcha.
talking about, Jen.
Death from Impulsor said, I need a new light for my hobby desk that is good. Any suggestions?
I'm spoiled and probably not the right one to talk to. We have ridiculous studio lighting here.
Well, but if you didn't have that, you
We
would use the foldable ones
honestly,
from
we
Amazon.
use really cheap Amazon LED lamps that work great. We've used them for, forever, I think.
Yeah, they're folding LED lamps. They fit in the
Go bag.
go bag.
They're the ones we recommend for using on your go bag, and they work great.
Pikmin, yes, we will. I mean, I will not be. Jason probably will be, but we do have a team going to LVO this year for sure. We will have a booth, and did we decide 4 people? I think 4 people. So if you're going to be there, definitely make some time to stop by the Monument Hobbies booth. Mo, hello. Figure drawing said, do you use black as a base in general? Yes.
Yeah, this is dark neutral gray. Because I knew I was going to be doing black armor, building up off of blue, and it makes that a little easier to start with the gray rather than the black when doing black. It sounds kind of funky and backwards to say it that way. But if I know I'm going to be painting a lot of stuff black, then I'll start with just a dark gray or even a dark brown rather than an actual black base.
Flapjack said, is plaid typically metallic? Yes, I think the way we do it, yes.
It's non-metallic. Non-metallic plaid
Non-metallic.
was what was specifically asked for.
Non-metallic.
I'm going to need y'all to get with the program.
Okay, Poppy, that's enough. Camology question, how long do you paint before you refresh your brush with more water or paint?
Great question. Typically it depends on what I'm doing. Like right now I'm doing little streaks of color. And so as the brush deforms, because, we talk about how the more you do little brush strokes, the more the point will deform. And so if the point gets a little less sharp than I want it to be or something like that, then I'll go back and clean it. Or if it's just not drawing paint the way that I want to on the model. Like as I go through, if I'm doing very light hits of paint to do these little streaks of hair on his beard and I notice that I'm not getting consistent paint output, then I'll go back. It really is a matter of looking at the work you're doing and looking at each brush stroke and how it's applying to the model to determine if you've got, good paint release from the brush. Is it doing what you're asking it to do? And if it starts acting a little funny, not doing it, my lines aren't being as crisp as I want them to be because the paint is running out on the brush. So it's skipping, and not letting me pull a full line. Or like right now as I'm going through, I'm not getting much color at all because I've used up most of the paint on the brush. So go back, re-wet the brush, dry it off on the paper towel or leave it wet depending on if I'm glazing and such. So it's hard to really give you a definitive answer because depending on what I'm painting, it's always a different thing that I'm looking for the brush to do. If I'm looking to do base coats and I just need coverage, then it's going to be based around whether or not it's, covering the area correctly for what I'm doing. Here we're doing a little bit more, I guess you'd call it detail. It's not really detail, but I am doing line work, because I'm doing these little pulls of hair. This is kind of just layering where my shadows will fall because the dark golden brown will stay in the recesses of all the clumps of hair that I don't color with this color, and that'll start setting up my shadow to let me find my contrast in the hair that I'm painting.
Jason, what brush do you use the most if you had to pick one?
Lately, it's been this synthetic for the past 18 months. It's been this synthetic number 3 that we're going to be releasing here in a couple months. Or one of our pro synthetic number 2s and 4s. So 2, 3, and 4 size brushes are where my wheelhouse is. Same with Jordan, really. He paints with a Sable 3 all the time. So very similar in that regard. They're brushes that have a large enough well to hold quite a bit of paint when you're doing base coats, but also a fine enough point and control to do what I'm doing now, draw like lines of hair on a face or whatever you need them to do. So I typically will do that. Now, when I want to go in and do the next layer of highlight on this, I might switch down to a number 1. Really just depends on how the brush that I'm working with, like the brush that I'm working with right now is fairly beat up, right? I've been using this brush for over 18 months and never cleaned it. You can see all the paint in the ferrule. I beat the crud out of the brushes that I'm testing before we'll sell them to you to make sure that I feel comfortable that no matter where you are on your painting journey, you can pick the brush up and expect it to do well. I don't have to have you be more knowledgeable about brushes or treat it like something special. These you can beat the crap out of. So I have done so.
It's a great brush.
Yeah, it's been doing really well. The point is a little busted now, So I have to the question before, I have to go back and reload a little more often because my point will deflect and get out of shape a little bit quicker on this brush because it's older. But like I said, I've been painting with this one and the sister brush to this one for 18 months. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And maybe not 18. It's been over a year that I've been testing these. And, so in doing that, I feel very confident that they work well. But sometimes they don't work as well as they did when they were new. That's just kind of the way it goes. But yeah, that's the range of sizes that I like, Chris.
Chemology has another question. If you make a mistake painting the hair and get some on the skin, how do you generally fix that? Would you need to repaint the layers?
No, well, it depends, I guess, where, right? Like if I went into an area where I really did need the underpainted colors to show through and, I wasn't able to fix it right away, then yeah, I would go back and maybe like on the forehead, I might paint with some of the red oxide and then a little bit of the bright yellow green and then glaze the skin tone back over it. But I would do it in the spot where the problem was. I don't think I would have to go back in and repaint like the whole forehead or anything. I guess it always comes down to how big of a mistake did I make, right? He's got like a little Superman curl here.
And then from Chemology, do you refresh with water always, then paint? Or is it okay to dive back into the paint? I think meaning do you rinse your brush in the middle?
It depends on how you're painting, right? There's not a problem with going back into, if I already have a very wet paint, like I've thinned it out on my palette really far for glazing, then I may not go re-wet my brush. I may just go straight back to the paint. I do that occasionally. Most times I go back and add more water and re-wet my brush because I'm also cleaning out the paint. Remember that you want to make sure you're removing the paint from the bristles on a frequent basis so that you don't get any skinning of paint on the brush. It'll start to dry in the bristles. And so to avoid that, I'll just continue placing it back in water to clean it. Even if I don't need the wetness, then I'll dry it off and then add more paint to it.
ADC Creations, that is a size 3 synthetic brush he's been using. He's been testing out a new one.
Yeah. It's like our Pro Synthetic size 4 in its size, but it's a new sizing that we're doing. We haven't had a size 3, so it's kind of in between a 2 and a 4, as you would expect, but has a little bit bigger belly than the Pro Synthetics. It's a new filament that we've been looking at for a while now, since 2022-ish. And is going to be part of a lower cost. I dread to call it beginner brush set, but we're pricing it like a beginner brush set, something that would be for, great for somebody just getting into the hobby as well as people that are well seasoned, because it'll be a little bit less money. It'll have a broader set of sizing to it. So it's got a 00, 1, a 3, a 5. So a little bit bigger bodied brush for base coating and doing vehicles. And then the BAB we're bringing back. We've had calls to bring back the Big A brush. And so we are doing so.
Jason, here's a good question, Death from Impulsor. What's the difference between using a wet palette compared to a glass palette? Like, what is the biggest reason, in your opinion, or like, what's the biggest difference?
Well, the biggest difference is that one's going to add moisture to your paint. The wet palette's going to have a base of moisture that your paints are drawing from all the time, which can, in theory, keep them hydrated. In practice, not really the way that works very well. But that's the thing, right? A glass palette is simply that. It's a piece of glass that is going to allow you to put your paint on it and use it rather than paper. It doesn't have a waxy surface, whereas like on palette paper, sometimes you'll put acrylic paint and add water to thin it, and it beads up like oil on water because the waxy surface of palette paper just does that. The glass doesn't have that waxy surface, so it won't bead up. So it allows you to thin and have more control over your paint. Feels better to me. I have both. I have glass, and I'm working on palette paper today. So I'm fairly consistent in my inconsistency there. And Jordan uses a wet palette. The wet palette is good in concept, like I said. It's great if you're mixing a lot of your colors. You know, like right now I'm mixing dark golden brown and golden brown. And so whereas on the quote-unquote dry palette paper that I have to continually go add more paint to my mixture to bring it back to the same color because it'll dry out pretty quick on my palette. A wet palette might make that mixture of those two colors stay flexible longer so that I don't have to do that as much.
Yes, Game Delay, big artist's brush. That is what BAB stands for.
That big artist brush, yes. That's exactly what BAB stands for. So yeah, that's a big difference. You'll hear a lot of people say that the wet palette keeps acrylic paints, active longer and such, and it can, but it is an imperfect science and it depends on your environment. A lot of people, I think, get bummed out because they see somebody use a particular tool and then they go to use the tool and don't see the same results. And that's because you're reliant upon barometric pressure, humidity, all that stuff when you're dealing with moisture and evaporation rate, temperature. I don't like wet palettes. I tend to not ever use them because I spend more time having to make sure that the dried out wet palette doesn't curl up and make my paint get all crappy because we're in Arizona where it's really hot. So I don't use them for that reason. I have used them on stream just to prove that I'm not, inept. Some people are like, you just don't know what you're doing. So we can prove that's not the case. I just don't like them. Believe it or not, wet palettes are made for watercolors in general. Gouache and watercolor. Colors that are already supposed to have a body of water, that's a part of them. Because it is an uncontrolled substrate. There's nothing that can guarantee the amount of water it adds to your paint. So it can over dilute paints if you over wet the wet palette. And then you wind up in a situation where your paints don't perform the way you need them to and start to separate and don't keep well and stuff like that. So.
Ghost Hunter asked how I get anything done with Poppy. She is not normally like this. I don't know what's going on.
She knows she's on TV.
She was fine on Friday.
What's she doing?
She's like all up in my face and she's whiny. I took her out. I don't know. I don't know what she needs. She has not been like this all day. This is brand new.
She's fearful for her life. She's learned that chat is not all nice and fun and games like they say they are. She's picking up.
Let me just see. She needs extra love, maybe.
She's only needy when Jen's not around. So to have
it's
her be
weird
like this
for-
when Jen's
yeah.
sitting here is a little weird. She's fine. She's going into heat though, so we found out she ain't fixed.
Bootylicious artist booty. Camology said, speaking of brushes, any reason you'd use something other than a round tip brush?
Like a round bodied brush, you mean?
Yeah, probably.
Um,
I don't know what you want.
No. There's a company that here recently brought out cat tongue brushes, and because there's some famous painters that use particular artist brushes, they probably come from canvas painting and have used that style of brush for detail on canvas on flat surfaces. But for painting on a three-dimensional surface like what we do, the artist round is your best shape. It's not the only shape out there, so it doesn't mean you can't do cool stuff with other brushes, but by and large, the artist round will be what you gravitate towards. It has the good variety in size, has a good belly for holding paint, although a lot of cases we're not painting for long enough periods of time to need a tremendous amount of paint on the brush to...
Michael Paints Mini says, I'm having trouble with my Pro Acryls drying out quickly on the brush and Mini, but I think it's the dry winter, and I have fans circulating in the air. Would you recommend one of those additives in that case?
Maybe. What is the purpose of having the fan? Anytime you have air blowing across a surface you're trying to paint, you're going to increase or decrease your cure time, right? You're going to speed up drying. So if you can keep air from flowing across your acrylics, doesn't matter what the brand is, you're going to have that problem regardless. So if you can get the fan to not do that, that'd be great. You don't want to speed cure acrylics if you can avoid it. Some people will dry their paints with hair dryers and stuff like that, and I always recommend not doing that. Paint needs to cure as paint needs to cure with kind of natural ability to have it, dry correctly. If you don't, you can pull pigment into textured pools and have all sorts of problems. So,
Oh, he's not using fan on the minis, but just in the room.
yeah.
He wants to extend the cure time.
Yeah, like our glazed wash medium does a great job of that. You can buy various acrylic drying retarders as well that do a great job. But be careful with them because you're also diluting your paint. And you can, not with our glazed wash medium so much, but with drying retarders, you can get to a point where you've got kind of a gummy feel to the paint. So I would recommend being cautious how you apply that. It's meant for use in much larger batches of paint. When we talk about most acrylic additives, the people that are using them are painting big canvases or bigger surfaces. And so the things that those mediums do in small batches aren't as frowned upon. For us, they can cause the paint to do weird things when you're trying to do small brush strokes. So be a little cognizant of that.
I want to go back to something that Valthorn said, and I don't know if I missed the context of it. But Valthorn said, sounds like pro acryl in general. I either get wrinkles after it dries or an orange peel texture, no in between. Valthorn, are you still around? Can you clarify?
If you're getting textures with our paints, chances are you're either painting them over a substrate that isn't cured first, or you're over thinning your paint and layering on too fast. That's really it, right? Because if you don't we talked about it yesterday briefly, if you don't let a layer of paint cure and put another layer of paint over it, and our paints take longer to dry. They're naturally have what we call a longer open time so that they're easier to blend with. That's just one of the things that Pro Acryl does better than everybody else. But it means that if you're used to slapping paint on one coat after the other very, very quickly, that you can have one coat not dry completely. You put another coat over it, and even though we don't use heavy solvents, it's still a water-based paint, that underlayer is still trying to dry as you've now trapped it underneath another layer of wet. And so it will re-wet what's already skinned over and tried to dry. And then now you have where you're moving paint, and when it dries, it can be wrinkles, as you're saying. They wouldn't be consistent, not the whole model, but in particular areas, you might see that because you're technically tearing the first layer. You're moving that half-cured paint into wrinkles that are following your brush stroke or whatever, and it's pulling texture into your paint that you're not used to. So you got to make sure every layer dries. That generally happens when we're painting too wet, which is why I say you're over diluting the paint, because a lot of people are trying to make their coat of paint thinner because we've heard from certain people that too thin coats is the way you should paint, and you should thin your paint and all of this. We made paint that you don't have to worry about thinning unless you're trying to reduce its opacity. I paint literally, here's my, go to palette cam real quick, Chris. This is my palette, right?
There.
It's a piece of paper or a piece of glass, right? So there's only moisture on my brush is the only moisture I put into this, right? So I get my brush wet by cleaning it in my cup, wiping it on my paper towel real quick, and then now I've got whatever moisture's on this brush is all that's going to go into the paint to paint the model the way I do. And so that's all you need. That's the way we built Pro Acryl, to get over all the hurdles that the other paints have because they're not artist paints. I say that. They're paints that can be used by artists, but they're not built like fine art paints. They're built like house paints, and house paints are thicker. It's just the premise of them, right? Because they're meant to cover in one coat. For the hobby, we want to have more control than just one coat coverage, right? Because we're trying to vary the way the paint blends, shows the layer underneath it. And so we want to nuance it a little bit. And so with thicker paints, you're having to thin them more aggressively and then build up more layers. With Pro Acryl, you use fewer layers, less thinning, get the job done quicker, have it done better, and you're fighting your old habits when you switch to it. So learning the tool is one of the biggest things. And we talk about that a lot, right? At every level of painting, whether beginner or seasoned vet, you'll have to spend a little bit of time focused in on how the tool works to get the most out of it.
Before we do that, the specific question from Valthorn, can we just ask a really quick one? And again, maybe this one, maybe I missed it. Spencer Armstrong is asking about an off-white in the 24 colors that'll be out at Adepticon. Is there going to be anything close to an off-white?
We've got a couple of very pale grays. Our current line of ivories is really what I think of when I hear off-white. So all of our ivory, bright ivory, are kind of off-white. Bone, olive flesh, those are all off-whites. Depends on what you're meaning. So if you can help me out and let me know, do you want something that's just not as bright white as titanium, but pretty close? Is that what an off-white is meaning to you?
And then more explanation from Valthorn said, heavily thinned, it wrinkles. Straight, it gets orange peel. 30 seconds or 30 minutes, hair dryer or not, it does that without fail.
Orange peel is caused by a sublayer of paint not curing. Your primer, that's literally the only thing orange peel is. Orange peel isn't the layer that shows the peel. Orange peel is the layer underneath it not being cured when you paint over the top of it. 100%, that's the only thing that causes that. That little bitty spotty texture that almost looks like tiny tears. It's called off-gassing. So when you have the evaporation occurring, regardless of the solvent, so if you use a rattle can spray paint that has a heavy solvent, like an acetone, like our sprays do, or an enamel or a lacquer, then that, until it's fully cured, has a slight gassing, right, where that gas releases from the paint and causes the paint to cure. That's the chemical reaction that causes the polymerization of the acrylic in the paints, right? And so if you've painted a layer of paint and it's not fully cured, and you put another layer of paint that dries faster, which acrylics do. So this is generally what happens when we put an acrylic over the top of a non-acrylic, or an acrylic with a heavier polyurethane, like a heavier polyurethane primer that takes longer to dry, fully cure. Then you put a fast drying acrylic, and even though our paints dry a little slower, they're still a fast drying paint, right? They're not oils. And so you put that over the top, it cures to a point where it won't let gas through it. And so that gas that's still coming out of the layer below that's trying to dry starts to poke little holes and force it up. And it's little bitty tiny microscopic bubbles that cause orange peel. So like when you see a car that's done that way, it's because they didn't let the prime coat or the base coats dry, or the paint cure before they put the clear on. And that all that paint underneath is trying to force itself to cure still, and it pops little bursted pustules out of the top layer that's already cured on top of it. That's why I say hair dryers are bad, because hair dryers only dry the top layer it touches, not the layers underneath it. And so the hair dryer will quick dry, flash dry the stuff on top, and the stuff underneath is still trying to dry and causes that texture by breaking. So if you're seeing either or, try to paint slower. It's really the gist, is don't try to force layers on so quickly. And you may have to change the primer you're using. But it's more like a process of patience, right? And we paint pretty quick on here. So, you see me yesterday laying down the primer and then painting over the primer, and we won't ever see any textures at all in anything we do. You'll never see orange peel or tearing. So I would say just, work out your process to switch areas. So like what you will notice with me is I'm painting this one color here. Once this is dry, if it were something that were a much larger base coat, because that's where you're going to see those kind of problems, right? You're not going to see orange peel or texturing and painting hair like this, right? Because it's too little of a paint and too narrow of an area to really gain texture. But if I were painting his armor in a broader area and I started seeing those effects, one of the things is like paint a coat of paint on and then go move to something else. Go base coat the cloak in this example while that layer dries. Move around the model and paint more areas of the model with their base coat so all of those colors are getting a chance to cure. And if you go through and paint the armor and the boots and the cloak and the skin with a base coat and then come back to the armor, now the armor's probably ready to paint over and you're fine.
Said I'm using Pro Acryl primer, waiting 24 hours after application.
Yeah, I would have to see pictures and help you out, but it's definitely nothing in the chemical composition of the paint.
You can for sure contact us at support@monumenthobbies.com. Send pictures, video if you have it. that
Panic Bomb
shows
makes a
your
good
process?
point that any kind of a chemical on the surface, soaps, if you've cleaned your models, I never, ever, 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 ever clean your model with any type of solvent or soap, ever. Because all of the models that we do, whether I'm not a Valrac, I don't know if you are, or Valthorn, I don't know if you are, but don't ever clean your models with any kind of soap. Warm water and a brush is all you ever need. Rinse them if you have a resin model that feels slick because it has mold release on it. Rinse it with warm water, let it dry. The problem is that resins, metals, right? The metal models that you might come across, like from Infinity or whatever, and all the resins and all the plastics are very porous. They don't seem porous. You don't think of them as porous like a sponge or a volcanic rock or anything like that, but they do. They are porous. And so anything you put on top of them seeps into them. And soap is the worst culprit of bad paint jobs because it will not ever allow the primer or anything else to fully cure because that soap is also trying to evaporate and dry underneath everything. And that takes forever, right? So be careful with washing. Washing can be a big culprit for that. There's also issues with water. You know, depending on the chemical composition of the water, you may want to try distilled water. You may want to try not distilled water and use the water out of the tap if you're having problems. So, doesn't primer dry at different paces depending on humidity too? Everything will dry at a different pace depending on humidity, right? The more humid it is, the longer the dry time will be because evaporation is occurring at a much slower rate in high humidity because the air is already reaching saturation points, right? You know, you have 100% humidity where there's literally water in the air. You've only had orange peeling when you're needing some vitamin C. Ugh, can you imagine? Nobody eats the rind of the orange, do they? I'm sure somebody does.
Zest.
Oh, is that?
You can zest it. But once you hit the white part, it's terrible.
Oh, right on. No, thinning. So Percro will thin to its heart's content. You can thin it way, way down. Yesterday when we were doing the glazing with the skin tones on this face we're doing, I glazed it way down. You can thin them way down. You just have to know how to control it. Again, putting more liquid than you need back on top of another layer will reactivate the layer underneath it. So painting wet can have problems of causing texture and orange peel and things we're talking about because the layer beneath it, right? Even with 24 hours of cure time on the primer, if you paint super wet over the top of it on that first layer, can move that paint around again, because that's not the way paint is really intended to do. You're going to need more of a fundamental base and remove more of the moisture. Remember, yesterday I talked about glazing. You don't want to put a lot of wetness on the model at any time, no matter what the layer beneath it has been dried, or if it's the first layer you're putting on. Too much wetness means it won't dry properly. Because now imagine you have this big thick layer of paint that you've put on in one go. That's why you don't airbrush really thick, you don't rattle can really thick, because it will cause it, again, the same problem. All of these paints we're using dry pretty quick in the grand scheme of things. So if I put on let's just talk about a thin layer of paint that we would normally do might be like this, and when it cures all the way top to bottom. If I put on a thick glob of paint, it cures along the top of the thick glob of paint first. You've seen this happen on your palette. The droplet will skin over. There's still good paint underneath it, but you got to poke through it to get the wet paint in the droplet because the droplet skins, it cures. That paint underneath will take a lot longer to dry. That's exactly what's happening on your model when you put too much paint on it. So too much moisture creates a situation where the top layer of the paint cures, but the underneath doesn't, and it forms all these problems we're talking about. So that's where it comes from, painting in thin layers, as opposed to on a canvas where you can glom on a lot of paint because you're not worried about it. You're not handling it. It's not a three-dimensional surface where it's rubbing in weird ways. It's just paint. It's going to sit there. It's going to dry, right? Eventually, it's all going to cure, and you're not worried about orange peel because you're putting the paint on thicker than the orange peel will ever show through. So you're never going to have those problems. Here, we're fighting the fundamental nature of not wanting to obscure detail, so using thin paint in thin layers that can still be too thick, right? And so when glazing and painting thin, make sure you take most of the moisture, right, off of the brush to where it's really only the base thinned out diluted pigment that's going back on the model. You don't want to be pushing water around on the model. You don't want to feel like you're moving a droplet of paint around. You just want it to feel almost like you're always dry brushing. You're just getting the paint you need in the location you want. And that unless you're doing a wash or some type of a filter that's supposed to spread out, that you don't want to see that happen. And once you get used to that, then yeah, like I said, you'll never see us with issues like this because we just take the time to do each layer, move on to another, not overwork it. I say you won't see it. Yesterday I did. Yesterday I tore the primer down on the neck because the primer in the area where the light and the air didn't hit. Can you go back to the model real quick?
Pickman, I have an answer for you, so hang tight.
So down here in the area that dries last because it has the least amount of air, there's a pocket of primer way down in there. And I went and drew a big thing of royal purple out of there, and it pulled the primer because the primer was still wet down there, right? I didn't think about it. So sometimes if I'm working too fast, I'll cause myself problems, and I had to go back and touch it up. But yeah.
Pickman, the dark crimson and dark burgundy do have a different finish. They're not matte. You'll see it on the bottle, either G for gloss or S for satin. We have a few of those paints in the signature sets, and it's because that's what the artist requested. So just when you see a G or an S, T, M, those are showing the different finishes. So G for gloss, S for satin, T for transparent, M for metallic, and then the rest are just the standard matte finish.
Here's a quick question. Can y'all's transparent paints be dry brushed? Use case in thinking is tinting a metallic paint for like an energy effect. Would those work out okay with the dry brushing? That like blows my mind for some reason.
There's no reason why you can't, but they're not opaque. So the issue is that with dry brushing, what you're really looking for is an opaque paint that sits along those edges and gives you enough of a visual without having to put a lot of paint in the area. That's what makes dry brushing work. So the transparency, it would be fun to see what they do. I would do a test area before you commit to it fully.
I just didn't even think about that. That's kind of
right.
interesting.
But yeah, and they're gonna, if you're dry brushing over a lighter area, so maybe you would want to dry brush with something like I don't want to say white, that's a little too vivid, but maybe you take something like a bright ivory or a white blue or a titanium white even, and do a very light dry brush to catch the edge that you're trying to get the light on and catch all those areas, and then do the transparent over the top, because that'll make the transparent color pop. The problem with the transparency is that because they're so translucent, right, they should be translucent paints, they show the color underneath them. So if, like you say, like if I were to dry brush over gray with the transparents, I wouldn't get a lot of effect because it's going to let too much of the gray show back through. But if I were to dry brush this white first, then I'd have all these details on the lion's head, tiger's head in white, right? Legally distinct lion. All the details in that white dry brush. And then I could put the transparent back over, and the transparent would not only blend into the gray where it hits the gray, but also be bright where the white is. So that might be a really cool effect for glow and stuff like on plasma and areas like that. I could see that being really cool.
Terry Bailey said, "Holy cow, the paint guru and the young lady are on YouTube." We are. And then Game Delay said, "So the paint guru, Jen, and the young lady, Poppy, what does that make Jason?"
Oh man. I'm just the shill.
Poppy is.
I'm the talentless hack.
Today.
What's the different use case for using a transparent versus thinning a traditional paint down to a glaze?
The transparent starts that way. You're trying to force an opaque paint to be more translucent when you go the other direction, which is not bad. We do it all the time. It's what I did with the advanced flesh tone. The transparents are single pigment paints, number one, so they have higher vibrancy in the color range that they are supposed to be. That's just the nature of the beast when using single pigments. And so they're going to give you more intensity of the color so that the more you dilute them, right, the more you keep that, or the more of that color you keep, I guess is the way to say that, right? So if I take transparent blue and put it over something, it's going to be really, really blue, even though it lets some other color show through. Whereas an opaque paint, as you thin it, desaturates heavily and winds up being much harder to get that base color to come back to where you're seeing it, which is why we tend to, when we go to glaze, we want to pick a darker color than you actually want to see when you glaze, because assuming you're glazing it over a brighter base or your highlights or whatever, it's going to brighten up. So pick a darker color glaze, because if you pick a light color and glaze it, it darkens because the stuff underneath it shows through and it totally desaturates, so you don't get the effect. So there's a lot of playing you have to do in that realm. Whereas with the transparency, you can say, I need this shadow to be more purple. Take transparent purple, thin it way down, glaze it in, boom, purple. Because it just starts like almost an ink level of intensity. Okay? So that's kind of where they do. They can share and do the same job, One of them takes a lot more thought with the opaque paints and glazing them down, a little bit more confidence and experience in doing it to get what you want. You'll still get there. The transparents can be like, I just need to glaze some purples into the shadow. I reach for my transparent purple, right? When I want to glaze flesh tones, I don't mix flesh tones out of the transparent. I take a flesh color and glaze it on, right? But when I want to do things like add color into shadows, add a little bit of touch, like I want to warm a highlight, I'll take a little bit of transparent yellow, thin it way down and glaze it on the highlights. Then it warms it up immediately. And I only have to do one pass. So that kind of, you see when you start playing around with them, how intense and how purposeful the transparents can be and how quickly they can get you to your end game. Whereas you need a lot more fooling around, a lot more thought and, what's the right word? Intent behind doing the opaque paints.
Camology, if you mix transparents with the opaque paints, it will
It's
just make them
awesome.
more vibrant.
Yeah, it can be awesome.
Super awesome. I used to mix transparent red with magenta before we had like our hot pink and dark hot pink and things like that. It works great. Valthorn wants to know if either of the textures can be fixed or if the model needs to be trashed. And Terry Bailey, congratulations. It's so exciting.
Unfortunately, texture is physical. And so in order to get rid of physical texture, you're talking about needing to strip that area. You can sand it down lightly and then repaint just that area so you don't have to do the whole model. But yeah, when you have those kind of problems, unfortunately, it's a dried texture because the acrylic is going to dry to a plastic, right? And once it's cured in that texture, you now have plastic in that shape. And so it makes it really difficult to alter after the fact.
Terry Bailey became a grandpa over the holidays.
What?
I know,
Congratulations.
it's exciting.
A holiday baby, like on like a Christmas baby or just close? New Year's baby or just close? Were they like holding out?
2025, baby.
I've heard of people like holding out for New Year's.
We got a new baby over the holidays as well. This one. Camology said, I think I remember one of the videos mentioning that your transparents do kind of what inks do. I have never used inks before. What is their use case in our hobby?
Really, it's for people that want to thin stuff down and get vibrant color. Because acrylics, when you thin them down, lose their vibrancy. They desaturate very quickly when you dilute those pigments. And mainly because a lot of the acrylics are mixes of variations of pigment. And let's say you have a green you really like. When you thin it down and you spray it, it doesn't have that same intensity of green because it may not be made from green pigment. It may be made from blue and yellow pigment, which from an art perspective seems like, well, duh, you mix blue and yellow and CMYK and that's what gives you green. But that's not how you want to do paint. You want paint to start with green pigment. So when you thin it down, it's still green. Because what happens when you're thinning paint is that you can imagine like it's really tight pigments together. The reason why you see green from blue and yellow with what we call subtractive mixing is that you are having a blue piece of pigment and a yellow piece of pigment that are laid over one another, right? And your eye can't see the difference, so it creates a color of them being mixed when they're not actually mixed, right? So you've got blue, yellow. If I put them like this, you see blue and yellow. But as the closer and closer I get them, there's a visual phenomenon that happens where they show the stripes and it shows red and blue stripes, but you think you see purple when there really is no purple, right? It's a red stripe and a blue stripe, but your eye's registering purple because it can't distinguish where those two colors come together, that there's not another color there.
Well,
That's
like,
what...
No, I was just going to say that's like the Flamon, how he does all of his...
To some extent, but what we're talking about is that when you get it together and you dilute those paints, if it's made with all of those different pigment colors and you dilute them, the pigments start to spread. That's how they become translucent and see-through, is now you can see between the actual physical pigment to see the color underneath. But if it's blue and yellow, the color starts to look blue and yellow. It stops looking green. And so with most acrylics, the opaque acrylics, as you thin them, now that doesn't happen with pro acryl because of the way we create our paints, but it starts to desaturate that color. That can happen with Pro Acryl because you might have a color that's made from a dark green that has a little bit yellow and white in it to make it a brighter green. As you thin it, you now have the dark green pigment, the yellow pigment, and the white pigment, and so it tends to get a little less vibrant as you thin it out. The transparents are one pigment only. No matter how you thin it, it's the same vibrant pigment. There's nothing else to distract your eye. It's that pigment, and whatever you're putting it over is the only thing you're fighting with. So it'll be vibrant, less so because it's not all tight pigmentation, but the same blue is available everywhere because it doesn't get more blue as the pigment gets closer together. It's always blue. Does that make sense? Same with inks.
Dork Depot, thanks for that 6-month resub.
Woo, thanks, Dork Depot.
Woo.
Vector said, I would love a transparent jade.
Our white and our transparent green. There you go. Transparent jade. Transparent white, transparent green. There is no transparent jade because it's not a single pigment. So I would have to mix various pigments together and it would not be as good of a transparent color. Only the single pigments really do that well because those pigments themselves are not very opaque. They're very translucent in their native form. That's what makes all of that work really well.
Oprah Smash. I love that name. So that was a really good explanation.
A little bit of paint science you never knew you needed to know.
Pickman said, do you have a suggestion of what paints, what Pro Acryl paints to do CMY color mixing?
Believe it or not, Louise's set gives you everything you need. The dark hot pink, the bismuth yellow, and the ultramarine blue are fantastic. But you can also use our transparent yellow, transparent blue, transparent red, or dark magenta in that too. They will be very translucent, a la, fine art acrylics. So if you're really used to doing this, you'll know that you don't get opaque paints from any good CMYK paints out there. Because opacity isn't part of the question. Like printing inks are not opaque when they do that. So you will have your colors be a little more translucent so you can add white or black to them to get them to be more opaque as you tint, tone, and shade them. Grays will have that same effect. So now you're getting into the qualities of paint that, we go into that. What are you trying to accomplish? Do you want to paint a model and only use CMYK so you have that, that 5-color palette? You've got cyan, magenta, yellow, black, and white. And you want to paint a whole model that way because you can technically create any color in the spectrum that way. But what I was saying before holds true and makes that more difficult than it should be. I applaud people that want to go down that path and learn it because it's great for teaching yourself color mixing. It is a hassle that there's a reason why, even in the fine art world, we have lots of hues that are mixed with multiple pigments in them. Because mixing those colors over and over and over again, when you use like a particular yellow ochre all the time, you should use that and not mix it from CMYK. Because it's always better to go to the source for that pigmentation and not have to do the CMYK mixing. Like I told you before, in CMYK, there is no green. There is no red, right? There is no orange. So you're always mixing that, right? Which is in and of itself not bad, but it means that then when you mix that perfect green that you made with some other color that also has blue in it, it will start trending blue real quick because the blue and the green and the blue and this other color start amplifying the blue color hue more in your mix than it should, because green as a green pigment has no blue in it, right? And then this other color that has blue in it, you get blue-green, right? But if you mix green and blue together, you don't necessarily get the blue-green you're looking for because it starts trending immediately towards the blue, and the yellow component of it that makes the green really happen starts to shrink away too quickly. So there's some things like that that make that color mixing harder, but definitely easy to do. I mean, and it's a lot of fun. I don't know that we've done a CMYK challenge.
I haven't done that in a while, I don't think.
Yeah, we do our Discord challenges every now and then, and every now and then we break out. We do a lot more limited color palette challenges where we say, hey, you only have these 3 or 4 colors to use. Go.
Ooh, this is a good question from Hobbybot.
Can we get teeny tiny victories first, because
Yeah.
she's asked it already once. Teeny tiny victory said, I already washed some minis with soap. Are they likely to be okay if I rewash with just warm water?
I would rinse them again with warm water.
it a
Just
few
make sure you
times.
let them dry for a long time, like days. and stop using soap. The only miniatures I've ever used soap to clean were the Reaper bones because they're really weird. So I just don't use Reaper bones, unfortunately,
And
because
then,
that material is horrible.
and then another one. I just want to try and go in order so we don't miss any. Z-Force said I ordered some more paints. I got a set for my buddy, but I worry they could be frozen due to the weather and shipping. Will that hurt the paint?
The short answer is if they turn solid, yes. Anytime a water-based product crystallizes, that's an actual chemical reaction, and the paint won't work the same way after that. But that takes a lot. We freeze thaw test ours to minus 18°C 3 different times with our formula to know that it can survive general handling in cold weather, like in the back of a truck and shipping. But if it gets shipped to a house in the middle of minus 30-degree weather and sits on a front porch until you get home from work, there's probably going to be a problem, and all bets are off. So we always say during the winter, if you're worried about the temperature at the location you're shipping to, make sure that you're shipping to a place where a human can receive it, and you should be fine. The big question is if it gets left on a front porch someplace, buried in snow for a night, that kind of stuff. We've literally had people that it was like snowing, got delivered on their porch, covered with snow. They never saw the package. 3 days later, when the snow melts, there's the package of paint out on the porch. Maybe it'll work. It is water-based, so the water does have the chance to crystallize.
Jason, here's a good one. I was wondering a similar question. This is about potentially making a jade wash. Can using glaze and wash medium to paint ratio to create a wash? I would like to create a wash with bright jade or jade, trying to get the Votan Warriors armor look. So I guess what are some quick tips on glaze and wash medium to make washes?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can make any color wash with our glazed wash medium. Typically, I say to do the wash part of that equation, you're going to want to mix about, let's call it 5 to 1, 5 drops of medium to 1 drop of paint. And then after you have that mixture, add about 5 drops of water to it as well. The water is going to be the component that gets it to flow like a wash. And the glazed wash medium holds it together and, makes it not become too watery, believe it or not. But you still need to add a little bit of water. When you're glazing, you just do the glazed wash medium and the paint, because that makes it still feel like paint, maybe a drop of water. As you want to trend more towards a wash that flows easier across the surface, you start adding more and more water to it.
So if I was going to try to make a wash, what would the ratio I should start with to glaze and wash medium to paint, in your opinion, to start?
I'd start 5 to 1 glaze wash medium to paint, and then 5 to 1 the water as well. Does that make sense? So however many drops of glaze wash medium, that same amount of drops of water. And yeah, I think 5 to 1 is a good ratio to start with. Again, you'll find, depending on how you like to use your washes, that you'll adjust that. There's times where I do 10 to 1 because I want the wash to be very subtle.
Yeah.
Like when I'm doing Payne's gray and shadows on skin.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be really blue Payne's gray. I want it to just be a hint. So if I want it to be less of an impact, more dilution,
That's a great way to use that stuff too, because then if you're right, if you just want it to be just a hint of it, you can control it with more dilution.
Yeah, we had this conversation yesterday where I said that when glazing and washing, it's always more comfortable, I think, when learning and developing this skill, so to speak, to go thinner than you think is necessary, because you can do multiple layers to get it where you want it. Whereas if you're too opaque, you mess up your paint job. Right? You wind up that if there's too much color, it's hard to take the color away. If there's not enough color, you add more. And that's just a glorious thing about our hobby, is that going too thin is rarely an issue so long as you're not overloading the area, flooding it with material. You don't want to put too much wetness on the model at any given time.
Papa Chicken, has anyone used transparent or metallic paints with Noosh yet? How to turn out? I used transparent brown, a lot of transparent brown with a lot of Noosh, and I really liked how it came out.
Jordan uses the transparency a lot with Noosh, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I did transparent brown with Noosh, and then I did transparent brown and petroleum brown, and then Noosh, and that came out with a very grimy, oily, like dirty rain type of weathering that I really liked.
Was this all on your Stampa?
That was on my Stampa.
Yeah. Yeah, and that all turned out great.
Yeah,
That's the best thing
did.
with Noosh. You can really play around with it. Metallics would be kind of cool. Just realize that as you thin metallics down, right, you start to not only get the pigment that makes it the color it is to spread, but the metal flake spreads. And so you got to be a little careful that it doesn't get too like star map sparkly when you thin it down, because the metal flake can be spread so far and randomly that instead of getting a metallic sheen, you get like spots of reflection, like you accidentally rolled over into glitter. You know, it's like there's a spot of glitter in occasional places, but it doesn't make any sense as to why.
Sure, accidentally.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how that glitter got there, babe.
Source is asking, from a technical perspective, what's the difference between a wash and a contrast paint? What is the...
Very little, actually.
They're very similar.
The contrast paint is intended to be more pigmented. It's meant to filter more because you're trying to turn the entire model that color. Whereas a wash is really trying to just reset in the recesses to shade, right? Does that make sense? The wash is not normally intended to leave such an impact across the entire surface. It's meant to skate across the surface and settle into regions of the model so that the bulk of the pigment only impacts particular areas, whereas the contrast paint is meant to turn your model that color. So it's kind of like a heavily pigmented wash is the biggest difference. But it's a great question because in reality, they are very much the same thing. Just one of them has more pigment to it.
But yes, the drawing for the lesson with Ben and Matt has already happened. Zambies! This is Poppy. She's being kind of a pain in the butt today. She's normally super chill, but now she's seems like she's a little bit more relaxed. Yeah, this is Poppy. This is Monument's new mascot. She made her way into our courtyard on the last Friday of the year, and she's ours now. She's the best. She is so sweet and so cute. And normally just lays around all day. She sleeps in my lap most of the day. But she's been a little needy today on stream.
Hair's looking great.
Yeah, I'm not trying to go too far on it. I just want to get some separation out on the hair follicles where I can and pick my lighting direction kind of for this model. I haven't really done that yet, so just playing around with it, seeing if I like it dark on the left versus the right or vice versa. I don't know that it matters really, but I do kind of like it like that where I'm trending a little darker to our right, his left. So we'll see how that plays out.
It got all quiet all of a sudden. I think we've answered all the questions. We can't possibly have answered all the questions.
That's it. Everybody knows exactly what to do. There'll be a test tomorrow.
Source said, correct me if I'm wrong, but adding more water makes Noosh dry faster?
Adding more water makes Noosh dry faster, correct.
Sir Addy said, I said it several times here already, but it happened again. Your heavy, warm white solved my color problems. This color is magic. I will paint my walls with it. That'd be very expensive wall paint.
Isn't it amazing, though? It's such a great color. Like somebody earlier asked for an off-white, and heavy warm white is one of those that I think is just great. It doesn't come as thin and ready to use out of the bottle because it is more of a heavy. We call it heavy. It's not a heavy acrylic like our tube paints are, but it's much thicker than our normal paint. So you do need to dilute that one just to be able to use it normally. I'll put a lot more water on my brush when I'm using the heavy whites, but the heavy warm white is a spectacular final highlight for non-metallic golds, metallic golds, just about anything that you don't want to quite push it to titanium white, because titanium white is so bright and disco ball bright. That heavy warm white's a great final highlight for stuff.
Game delay, are you spying on me? Because that's almost exactly what happened. What work is Jordan doing today? I assumed you kept him in a cage until painting time.
No, he actually works. He does a lot of work.
He does a lot of work around here. The consistency is made for a loaded brush. I mean, yes, that's
Correct.
the technique that they use, Ben and Matt, that was why they requested the heavier. Garrett said, "Are you painting your fantasy self?"
Yes. Yes. Tigre L. Anthony.
Phone and laptop in the cage. Are there plans for a heavy cool white?
No.
Wouldn't that just be white?
The cool white that we have is white blue.
White. It's just white.
White blue.
White blue.
Oh,
I love white blue.
That white blue finds its way on every model. It'll definitely be on this guy.
White blue is one of my favorites.
It's right now my favorite tint. It goes back and forth from bright pale yellow now. Pale yellow, bright pale yellow, and white blue tend to be my selections for best tinting highlight color. They're just too spectacular. All of them are just too good. I'm not going to dive too much into highlighting the back of the head until I know what I'm doing with my light. I know I can, no matter what happens to this model, I can work with what I'm doing right now. I can either brighten it up on one side and darken it with some glazes on the other, so I'm never going to have to repaint what I'm doing here, but it lets me just kind of play around with these technically 3 colors that we've done on the hair, but it's only 2, and then the mix of the 2. Dark golden brown, and then a mix of the 2 to get an in-between hue.
diet warm white.
Diet warm white instead of heavy.
Legally distinct Tigre won't stop ranting about Carol Baskin.
It's going to financially wreck me.
I will never financially recover
I
from
will
this.
never financially recover from this.
Tiger King.
I'll admit, I do not binge shows ever. I am not that person. I cannot look away from that show. I watched
It is a train wreck, dude.
I watched it all in one sitting.
Oh, wow.
We
One
watched
sitting.
it over a few days probably, but we had already heard a
was bad.
podcast about it.
Yeah.
So we kind of knew it. And then, so to see it all, like to see the people
it
was
was
like, yes,
mind-blowing.
this is what I needed.
I didn't want to. I did not want to binge that show. I'm like, you know what? This is not who I am. And I totally did. I didn't. I looked down on my
Maybe
watch.
it is who you are, Chris. Maybe you're fighting your true nature.
I guess so. It was horrible. It was watching an 8-hour car crash. That's what it was.
Sir Addie said, how can I make a violet, like a blue violet? Wait, what? How can I make a violet?
Like a blue violet, make like more pop.
More, okay. It
Like
always
more-
becomes gray and highlight. So when you highlight it, how can you make it more vibrant? 'Cause
Yeah.
rather than turning gray and getting dull.
Depending on how dark it is, something like faded ultramarine and a little bit of magenta can be really cool and move you into that violet. A little bit of purple and those blues. It depends on what you're looking for, the warmer side of violet or the cooler side of violet. Because again, those purpley tones can play in both. So I think instead of adding white, that's the trap that a lot of times we fall into, is you add white to it and it desaturates it, make it into like bubblegum real quick, and isn't a great color. It cools off or moves your color towards a neutral. And if you're really trying to keep it bright, something like the transparents are great there. Faded ultramarine with a little bit of transparent red in it might just be amazing, and then a little bit of white to brighten it up, but it'll keep you on hue. Cooler violet.
What?
Yeah, I mean, something like, let's take faded
Doghouse
ultramarine
Hobbies, we'll
on
get to
its
your question
own
next.
is like a really cool violet highlight, it has a lot of reddish tone to it, even though it's called faded ultramarine. It is like a really, really powder violet color. So if we were to take that, right, let me think. Again, I don't know what your shade is, right? I don't know how dark you're painting. But if I were to take something like royal purple.
Yeah, Zambi said, I love highlighting purple with faded ultramarine or magenta.
Yeah. Like if I were to take just a spot of royal purple into my faded ultramarine, I get a really bitchin' color.
So Ratty said magenta always makes it look pink.
Yeah.
I want
So that's what I'm saying. Like instead of that, start with a faded ultramarine and use the purple to add back rather than a raw magenta, right? And play with that to see where you get it. And I'll pull it up more with the faded ultramarine here.
Can you put that a little more in focus, Jason? There you go. Yep. Nice. Yeah, that's a cool color.
Right. So is this kind of what you're thinking? Does this get you into that bright enough realm to do what you're trying to do? Because I can sit here and play with these two colors and get, you know, a level of purple in it that makes me feel like it's a strong contender for any highlighting I'm trying to do and keeps it in that cooler blue side, right? Won't neutralize it. Gives you a really neat color. Nice. Yeah. I think that's it, right? And again, that was just faded ultramarine and a little bit of royal purple, but you could use our regular purple too if you wanted to. The royal purple is a little bit darker, so it gives you a little bit more pigment to play with and brighten it up. So it'll give you a little bit bigger swing in value. You can go darker with this combo and brighter than if you just use purple. So that could be it.
Doghouse Hobby said, what works best for a panel liner, Noosh or glaze and wash medium?
Glaze wash medium.
But
The glaze wash medium is for when you want to put the paint on and leave it, like panel lining and washes and glazes. And Noosh is for when you want to play with the paint, put it on, wipe it off, smear it around, make weathering stuff happen with it. It is meant to have a very long open time so that you can move the paint. It's not supposed to stay where you put it. It's supposed to streak. It's supposed to be like a grimy weathering effect. You know, it'll be an overall filter. And so that's kind of the way to think of them. We call Noosh a subtractive weathering medium, meaning you put it on the model and then you remove it with your finger, a cloth, a sponge, anything but your tongue.
Bud wants to know if the new colors have names or if they're still numbers.
They're still just numbers.
Yeah. Dark Shadow.
They won't have names that we will tell you until they release it at Adepticon.
Ooh.
And there's a reason
Stick
for
around.
that. That's the surprise.
That's the surprise. Dark Shadow 2115. 2115. My goal for 2025 is to get started in painting minis. Picked up the entire Pro line for Christmas. Getting my significant other to watch your live streams with me so we can learn together. That is awesome.
That is awesome.
Love that.
That is great.
And then a follow up to that, do you have specific colors for the range that you can't live without?
Oh, that's always the hardest,
them all.
right?
All of them.
The answer is yes, and sometimes it shifts depending on where my brain is as I'm painting. I like a lot of the colors that you don't... Okay, let me back up. The colors that I find myself using all the time are the colors that you never really see on the model. Does that make sense? And by that I mean that yellow ochre, dark purple, dark blue, Payne's gray, white blue, good gosh, warm flesh, all of these colors that I add into other colors to bring out brightness or darkness in a way that lets me maintain a hue. So if I'm painting red, adding warm flesh to it keeps it red as I brighten it up, as opposed to white, which makes it pink, right? Or yellow that brings it into too much orange. So I like those colors that are distinct in their brightness or their darkness, but that hold a hue together, right? So the white blue is a white, but it keeps things cool, right? I can highlight my blacks and my grays with it, and it doesn't make it feel like, you know, black and white gray, right? That makes sense? So a lot of the colors that you find that I'm the most excited about are not the color that the model looks like. It's not Pyro Red. I love Pyro Red, but if I'm painting Blood Angels, I'm using a lot of Pyro Red, but it's the colors that I use, like the Payne's Gray, the dark plums, and the warm flesh that I add into it that you just get that hint of in the model that give it its depth and its cool punch. Those are the colors that I really am the most excited about all the time. Because that's what makes the model come alive. Everybody can paint the red. It's what you do to the red that makes the model that interesting thing to look at. And so I really love thinking about all the colors that make the red better, right?
PNG, not JPEG, wants to know what our darkest green is and how to make it darker or keep it cooler.
Our black green
Yeah, black.
is a cool green, right? So, so black green is the darkest green that we have, and it is a cooler green already. If you wanted to keep it, if you wanted to make it darker, you just add something like transparent black to it, and that neutral tone of black will keep it cooler as you darken it up. The transparent black will allow it to stay green, whereas if you add coal black or an opaque black to it, you're going to desaturate it out pretty quick. It's going to become more of a dark green gray, you know? So you can add black to it very easily, but I would suggest transparent black if you need it to go even darker and stay on that cool tone. Now, you could even put like a cooler color in there, like a Payne's gray to darken it up, right? So we'll do that real quick. Play around with it and show you what I'm talking about.
Well, Tomato said it is a cool green. I'd even say it's pretty rad. Yes.
Just dropped a
agree.
big old drop on my table. That's not really cool. And then I need a Payne's gray. Right, so Payne's gray is a good color that acts, again, like a nice shade, but has a hint of blue to it so that you can move a color darker and keep it cool or make it cool, right? You can shift that tone how you need to. So again, I'll just use this big dirty ass brush. Right. And so I have, can we go back to my hand? Yeah. I'm not going to mix them, right? If we do this, you know, you can see that black green is a good dark green in and of itself. It's where I start like dark angels from if I'm doing 40K style dark angels, things like that. And then you have Payne's gray by itself, which is a darker shade that is very blue, right?
There. Oh yeah, there you go.
Right?
That's great.
And so if I mix those two, I'm going to get basically this really dark, kind of almost sea blue. Not quite dark sea bin, because it's going to be darker than that. But this is going to be a really neat color. Almost like a British racing green.
Yeah, that's cool.
Right? The camera's going to, there you go. The camera can, you can see it's a shade darker with it. But that cooled that green off immensely. But it's still definitely green.
That's the mixture you said?
Yeah, that's the mixture.
It's a great color.
Payne's gray is a fantastic mix to make things darker and keep them cool or cool them down, right? Black will do the same thing if the color's already cool because black's a neutral, so it'll keep it in the temperature range that it is, but you'll want to use, like I said, a transparent black rather than the coal black or the satin black because the coal black and the satin black will desaturate them. They'll overtake it. Same with whites. Transparent white will brighten a color up and keep it that color in that color range, whereas titanium white will turn it into bubblegum very quickly. It desaturates and turns colors into, you know, red to pink is the easiest way to describe it, but white does that to every color you mix it with.
Why didn't they've got an order on the way? It should be there anytime if it's not there already. Game Daily said, we can make it cool. Jason in an 80s teen comedy, determined to get the nerdy black green chosen as prom king.
Don't quit your day job. Don't quit your day job.
Defresh said black green with burnt red underneath for shadows is a great combo for worn cloth.
Oh, I can see that, yeah. Yeah, any of the reds and greens can do really well because you start getting like dirty brown feel from greens and reds together because that's what brown, you can get a good brown out of greens and reds. It'll be a very cool brown if you lean into the greens, but it can give you a really neat kind of dirty red or dirty green. They're neat. All right, let's start throwing down some armor color, I think, because I don't want to do the non-metallic golds because I'll cover up some of the armor. So back to Payne's gray, as a matter of fact. And some dark purple.
He's now fully passed out after bugging me nonstop for the first hour.
She's just been nonstop
She is
hounding you, and now she's finally
resolved.
settling down a little bit. How is it that like the one color I don't have over here is dark purple? What's going on here?
What?
Oh, there it is, dark purple. So we use royal purple on the skin. I'm going to use dark purple on the armor because I don't want as punchy of a purple in the shadows, but I still love purple shadows, especially for black armor. I'm doing his armor as 30k black armor. So, because as we all know, the tiger in 30k looked much different than in 40k.
Le Tigre.
So you're doing shadows right now?
Yeah, I'm going to do shadows on the armor, and I'm going to start locking them in with dark purple. As we do, if you ask around here, if you're new, just ask the person next to you. Everybody turn to your right and say, what is Fuse's favorite shadow color? And the correct answer is and will always be dark purple. I don't know what this cuff is supposed to be, so it's going to be armor color too. I don't care.
Swifter Bear said, when it comes to I lost it. When it comes to very pale or dead-looking flesh, do you still underpaint the same way?
I can. I probably use a little bit less red. Because the red gives the feel of the blood under the skin. And so the more red I use, the more lifelike it becomes. So probably a little less red and more purple, blue, bruisey colors. I feel like, to me, dead flesh will read as being bruised and coagulated blood pooled up and things like that. Almost like the real deep purples like this, the dark purple, where the blood has, pooled into the lower recesses since the heart's not pumping anymore and started to turn that blackish coagulated blood color under this flesh. So I like purples for that. Dark purple. Dark blue is really good for that. And using, less fleshy tones over the top too will help. Getting into things like the bright warm gray that we were using when we did the Trench Crusade models, right? Like this guy. We used a lot of bright warm gray on the flesh as we brought it up, and this was underpainted too. And so just with the royal purple, right? But using a more pale color that you wouldn't necessarily read as flesh all the time, but it does a great job of making it look, like he lives in a cave, which is kind of the undead feel, as opposed to much warmer flesh like what we're doing on the tiger, the legally distinct lion.
Soothsayer said, I tried out Pro Acryl Fluorescent Green this week since my Zinch warp fire was feeling too boring. Truly kicked it up to radioactive levels. I'm a big fan.
Nice.
Fluorescent green is awesome.
Yeah, the fluoros are insane. You give a good punchy, bright white or ivory tone underneath them and then hit them with that and any kind of fluorescent for like what you're talking about, like warp stone, just plasma coils, anything like that. It's almost like it paints itself at that point. You could airbrush this layer on too. I'm brush painting.
Bud remembers a dark pink in a dead skin recipe earlier this year.
What's that?
Did you use dark pink in a dead skin recipe earlier this year?
Yeah, the dark magenta probably. Again, it gives you the feeling of used to be alive, which is really cool. I'm trying to think of what I've done recently. The
Trench Crusade stuff. I'm trying to remember what that.
Well,
that
the
pink
Trench
skin was
Crusade stuff, I used the dark magenta. But I'm trying to think of the last thing I did that would have been something we could consider to be like dead flesh. It's probably like the ogre, the Mawpack, right? That I did for playing Warcry with Zambies, as a matter of fact. I feel like those guys were the closest I've done to dead flesh in a while. And they used a lot of that. They used some jades. I love jade as an underpainted color because it gives you a green and a blue and works really, really well for that.
Doghouse Hobbies wants a fluorescent blue.
They don't fluoresce as well. that frequency of fluorescent doesn't work very well. So our transparent blue over white gives you more punch. And it seems weird, but we weren't as concerned with the fact that they, reacted to UV lighting as we were with them being bright, vivid colors for doing OSL. So we didn't do the blue. I have it here. We tested it. I wasn't happy with it. It didn't feel it felt like I was charging you for something that was a shtick and not something that was really purposeful. So I didn't like it.
Boucheron.
Oh, Usheron we did dead skin on, and yeah, we used a bunch of dark magenta on him. That model we painted up for new guy Phil. It's over on his office. He never plays with him. He's ashamed of my Usheron, so he never does anything.
Punisher said, wife bought me the fluorescent set and Marvel Crisis Protocol, and I think I'm most excited about painting the measuring tools with them.
Oh my God, I had the most fun painting the measuring tools from that game, I have to be honest. I'm right there with you. It was so fun. We did them with various blends, like primary color blends, green to yellow, fade, and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun.
Pedro, yep, belly rub is back.
That's all going to be non-metallic gold. That entire shoulder plate, that'll be an absolute nightmare.
Big Bobzilla said, how does the fluorescent work for tattoos? I don't understand the question, but...
I don't know. I think they have like glow-in-the-dark tattoos that are made from various, supposed non-radium, cancer-inducing
like
things.
actual tattoos, not painting a tattoo. Is that what you're saying?
I would assume so. Assuming it's Big Bobzilla we're talking about, so I'm assuming he's not being 100% serious. That Bob guy. So, and I don't know, like, this should be, I think, cloth, to be honest with you. So I'm going to paint that red.
Oh, that part underneath.
See this stuff here?
Is that...
Has a little, well, you guys probably can't see it because the dark neutral gray is not really showing you the details, but there's some things with, like, skull clasps on them. And I know that he has, like, the thing that holds the cloak on. That's what I'm going to go with. Those are the straps that hold the cloak, and also his robes, which are not molded here. Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a green...
Chat, you can't see that, but if you look
It's
at
like
any of the lion
cloth.
pictures, new or old, he's got like a sash on the front that goes down to his tabard.
Yeah.
And it's white or red in the 30K world. So I'll probably do it white over the black with like red skulls or something like that.
Might I recommend a plaid cape in these trying times? Paint Liquor said, might I recommend a plaid cape in these trying times?
You
can recommend whatever you want.
can, yeah. There you go. Jen saved me. Thanks. She's like, I got you. So we gave you the plaid paint, and we need to have you push now. We gave you a plaid Discord challenge, so I think we've catered enough to plaid. That's not something we have to do anymore.
2025, less plaid.
It's real. It's real. I filmed it.
We get so much hate on that video. It's so funny.
Well, Awkwardish Band is going to do plaid accent nails and Pro Curl for Adepticon.
Oh, nice. We get so much hate for that video.
It's so weird.
It's so funny to me that people get like you know.
I get so mad about it.
Yeah, some people get so mad. They're like, "Are you people so stupid you don't know that's green screen?" Or everybody that's like, "This is bad AI."
I don't know what they're talking about. It's
I'm like,
real.
AI? This is totally real.
I stand behind it. I saw it with my
It was
own
funny
eyes.
because one of them, the guy that said AI, the other one came and said, "No, it's just bad green screen." So we had the double whammy.
Yeah.
We had the double
Actually,
whammy of internet, upset internet people on the commercial. It was like, "No, this is horrible." One person was like commenting on. I said, "Well, you know, we shot this as a joke, not for an Academy Award."
Oh yeah, because it was like they couldn't
Couldn't make the plaid
match
move
it.
with
the model move with the paint.
Now,
or
in my
whatever,
defense,
something like that.
in my defense, keying out the moving of liquid paint like that would take a little bit long of a longer time. So
We
we
weren't
decided.
interested. I was like, that's why I said it. It's like we weren't going for an Academy Award. We're having a bit of fun
Awkwardish
here, people.
Panda, that's awesome. Thank you. Awkwardish Panda said I was having. I mean, it's not awesome that you were having a terrible day. I take that part back. But Awkwardish Panda said I was having a terrible day the day you released it, and someone sent it to me, and I just laughed over it for a solid hour. I needed the giggle so bad that day.
Nice.
If you ever need one again, just go to that video and read the comments on it. They're pretty funny.
It's so funny to me.
Big Bobzilla said your commercials are funny as heck. I can't believe people take things like that seriously.
Well, it shows us that we reach a broader and broader
Yeah.
audience all the time because
That's true.
more people are finding us that don't know who we are. They just are like, maybe they paint miniatures or they're getting into the hobby or they played Space Marine 2 or whatever. And so for those people, I totally understand. Like, they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, they don't.
They just show up and there's this
This may be
irreverent
the first time
company
they've
that's
ever
like,
seen anything from us,
Well,
and they're
they've
like,
seen
"Oh my god, this is terrible."
traditional hobby commercials, and they're expecting a certain thing, and then you pass by this one, and it's like, oh, that's interesting.
yeah. Or like, nobody believes this, do they? I was like, we hope not. On the one, I was like, we hope not. Nobody believes this.
Philip said, I can't read. How am I supposed to read the comments?
He can write, though. That's the trick.
Nick Pye
So
said
you
it's
gotta write the
Paisley's turn in the
comments
limelight,
yourself.
and I am here for that. Give me some Paisley.
Where I bring the Payne's Gray down into the purple, I'm just going to kind of stipple the Payne's Gray as a quick, messy, we're going to do blend in air quotes here.
Okay, you're stipple like yeah.
Right, can you go back to a zoom?
Yeah.
Propane Tester said making plaid is hard. It takes equal parts science and dark sorcery.
And see how it gives us that blend?
Yeah. Is that Dark Sea Ben?
No, this is Payne's Gray.
Oh,
That's Payne's Gray. Okay.
Yep, Payne's Gray. Just Payne's Gray.
As Ismail Camarillo said, as a compositor working on movies, the subject brings up PTSD. The biggest pet peeve is when directors say they filmed everything practically and there was no CGI, but it's actually filmed practically and replaced all digitally. Is that the fix it in post kind of thing?
Ha! Hey, Chris, you can just fix that in post for you, right?
Source wants to know if you have any tips for painting embossed runes on chaos models. I want them glowing orangish like on the box. Glowing orangish like on the box.
So like deboss, the ones that are recessed, right? Engraved? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, like the runes on yes,
The
like the glowy runes in skin or armor or something.
yeah. The coolest way to do it is to take a like our transparent white
I was gonna say.
and let it flow into the recesses after you've painted the armor and up onto the top. So, you would paint the inside of the rooms. You would fill it, like basically flood it. Get your paintbrush with thin transparent white on it and touch it into the rune and let the transparent white like panel line wash into that rune. Let that dry. Touch it up where it lets too much of the color show through. Touch that up with titanium white. Hit it again with transparent white so the inside is just bright white. And then hit it with your color of your choice. The fluorescents are great for that. Fluorescent orange would knock that out of this world. Once you've done the fluorescent orange in the rune to make it that bright orange, then you may take a little bit of transparent yellow and do the middle with yellow just to give it kind of like that fiery tone to it. Would be really cool.
Paylicker said noosh white, then fluorescent orange. Jordan had a great one on his trench model. He did, right? Didn't he have some that had orange? Was it
Yeah,
orange?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did that, the orange runes on the war beast, the werewolf. And he did it with the fluorescent, too, which was spectacular. It made it just pop off there at the end. The camera wouldn't even show people how awesome it was. Because it had too much contrast to it. The camera was like, nope, I give up.
Yeah, the fluorescents are.
They're hard to film.
The fluorescents are harder to film without, because you have to, they all shoot in log. So to capture like the saturation and the contrast of something physical like that, cameras just freak out a little bit without overexposing it, and then it's just blown out entirely. Yes, or you'll be able to find it in the shorts panel. It's a great one. Oh, no, not the shorts panel. It's a past VOD. It was a little bit before Christmas.
Yeah, it would have been before Christmas because Jordan was gone.
Not a ton of exposed armor here as I'm figuring this guy out, which is kind of cool. Well, there is, but most of it's the non-metallic gold that's going to give me a heart attack. Too much gold.
What's the technique that Flamon uses in particular? What is that technique? Is that have a specific name?
No.
That, or is that just a style that he's developed with his personal taste?
So he sketches his highlight. He block. For me, I call it blocking.
Okay.
You block your colors in, and then you glaze in between each of your colors to create the in-between mix. And a lot of times that's done with mixing that color on your palette. So if I make a line of orange and a line of red on something, and they're very stark in contrast, they wind up looking like a candy corn, right? It's a band of color and a band of color and a band of color and a band of color. I don't have his
I know where
texture trainer up here, but we can show it at some point. You have those bands of color, and there's distinct lines where the colors start and stop, right?
Yeah.
And so in between, then I would take red and orange, mix them together, and then I would glaze that in that little area in between them until I was happy with it blending. So you'd go from red to orange, and in the middle you'd have red-orange blended in between.
Okay.
And the narrower you make those bands of color, the more times you have to glaze in between them, the bigger of a broad, clean blend you get, and it makes it look super smooth.
Yeah.
The time that it takes to do that teeny little glazing that happens in 1 millimeter of width for some of the stuff that he does is where it just drives me bonkers.
Yeah,
like I don't paint that way. I paint with a lot of texture so I can avoid that.
It's super intuitive.
Yeah, I paint with a lot of texture so that I don't have to do that.
We've
She
got
definitely
great
has a hard
metallic
life,
paints.
doesn't she?
I love our metallic paints.
Yeah. Rough life you got.
Brannigan Brush is rating with a party of 18.
Brannigan, what's going on?
Raiders.
Happy New Year. What's going on, everybody?
Happy New Year to you.
All right, as usual, we are going to use white, blue, and Payne's gray for black armor, because why not? So white, blue, Payne's gray. We will then use some various transparent black and things like that over the top of it, black wash perhaps, to make it feel a little bit more black. But this is how we're going to work up all of our black armor. Just these two colors.
Say that one more time for me.
So Payne's gray
Uh-huh.
and white, blue are going to be what makes up the black armor that we paint here.
Okay.
We'll go back over it in the end with some black wash or transparent black, but we're going to do it with just these two primary colors to work up the shine. Everybody's going to be like, that makes no sense. You're painting black. Why are you painting blue?
With dark purple.
Oh, with dark
shadows.
purple
Yeah,
shadows, yes.
Dark purple,
Dark purple shadows is the other color.
Nice. No, that's great. This is gonna be really great to see.
That's the other color. Continue using the number 6 brush here. And this, I'm going to start with just a little bit of the white blue, just a basic brush tip worth of white blue into the Payne's gray to start so that I don't go too bright, right?
Yep.
About like that.
Yep.
Can we zoom back in?
Yeah.
And then this is where I start finding, like, where do I want the shine to live? And I'll just kind of paint around big broad strokes to get it seated on there. Don't have to worry about blending right now necessarily. I'm again just finding the shine and the shapes of things. Do a lot of stippling again and hardcore Neanderthal blends, we'll call these.
But asking if this will be with the new black wash.
The new black wash?
Yeah.
What new black wash?
I don't know about a new black wash.
You can back out just a little bit, Chris. So I get... Chris is having problems with the buttons.
Sorry. I'm trying some better layouts. So I gotta get used to it a little bit.
No, I don't think there's a new black wash.
No.
The wash. What are the new wash colors?
Payne's Gray,
Payne's Gray.
concrete. The concrete, which is a brown gray ish.
Philip being awfully critical.
Of what?
Christopher.
Copy that, Philip.
Yeah. Propane taster's like, new black wash? I didn't get that memo.
No.
Payne's Gray Wash.
Yeah, the Payne's Gray may be what you're thinking, Bud. Was that Bud that was asking?
I think so, yes.
Yes. It was bad.
Yeah, no new black. Payne's Gray, dark magenta, and the concrete are the new three. What are you people giggling at?
So Jason, I have the newfound power of being able to directly chat right here, right? So I can respond to all these people like Philip
Like
who
Philip.
attack me, so that the artist can focus, which is great.
Is that me?
I hope so.
You are the artist. Yeah.
I hope
me?
so.
Is that me?
That's you.
Can you punch me in and then zoom me out with a puck, please?
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. Out the other way. There you go. Perfect. Give us that halfway.
Yeah. Jason, I have you. You can ask me to do. How's it feel? How's the angle feel? Does it feel
Good. Yeah, good. On these larger areas like this, bigger flat shoulder pads, I'll glaze a little bit of the lighter color first. So you see it's more wet than color. Then I'll come back with less wetness and do the highlight right into that area. Which will let me blend it a little bit as I go. Because I am a little more concerned with the blends in this area.
Great shot.
Yeah, Billy Bob, the weapon rack set includes 3 Pro Sables. It includes a 0, a 1, and a 3. They're same brush that you would get in the Sable set, except the handle is black instead of red. And then it also includes 2 synthetic size 6s. So like Ghost Hunter is asking if you need larger synthetics for like your base coats, then the weapon rack is a great option. If not, you might not find that set is useful. But we do also have our build your own brush set, so you can mix and match sables and synthetics and create your own set for the brushes the sizes that you would use it most. Hershey said, Jason, you mentioned that one of the washes had a slight change in the past. Which wash was it? And is there any way to know if you have the new or old version?
The brown is the only one that we added more pigment to. After the initial release. We had some people say they wish it was more brown, so we added more pigment. Because I agreed with them. I said, yeah, after it dries, it's not as brown as when you put it on. So we altered that. How would you know? Do you know when you bought it? The washes came out in 2022, I think. Is that right? Or 2023?
I can tell you, actually. It'll take a minute, but I can tell you.
I know I'm really bad remembering that stuff. I've been using them for so long. My brain always goes back to when I really had the aha moment with the product and the approval process, and that's a long time before it hit the streets. Okay, so again, just really rough brush strokes that give me the idea of color placement more so than the blend, but is still using the right brush stroke direction to set the pigment on there right.
There we go. The washes were September of 2022.
Yeah.
22.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. So I thought late 22. Because I thought the first place that they were at was Gen Con, right? But that would
I
have
think
been,
so.
No, that would have been after Gen Con.
Well, September would have been, but did you have them?
Might have gone
At
to
Gen
the
Con
show.
first?
Yeah, they might have
Yeah.
gone to the show.
Oh yeah, the bottle sizes changed a long time ago. They changed before, like expansion 3.
Can you re-center up for me?
Yeah, the only products that were in the original bottle size were the base set and expansion 1 and 2.
And metallics.
Well, we
They were
didn't have metallics until the metallics that were in the base set
right.
and expansion 1, but they weren't their own set at the point.
No.
But yeah, you would have them that way, I guess.
Correct.
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah. Hershey, do you remember if you bought them from us? If you bought them from us, we can look up your order. Oh, gotcha.
It's starting to look good. And we just gradually add a little bit more white blue into the mix as we go. And sometimes we take bigger jumps than others.
A question from Max. Since light-colored paints are notoriously difficult to glaze, in order to achieve a glazed pale skin tone, would it be smart to mix advanced skin tone and transparent white for use over underpainting?
It's a tough one because my gut is no, but it might be that for you the answer is yes. Those will definitely work. The thing with glazing is it's all about comfort, right? Where do you hit the mark that makes you feel good about it and confident in your ability to apply the paint so that it doesn't give you that, that feel that's causing you to say that bright colors are harder to do. Bright colors are typically hard to do because it will teach you very quickly that you have to have your brush stroke going in the same direction all the time. Like I'm glazing a brighter color right now, and if I don't make sure that my paintbrush goes from down here to up here with every single brush stroke, I'll wind up having clumpy looking bright color glaze, right? All of my brush strokes start low in my darker color and push the pigment up into this area up here where I'm at. And then you can kind of stipple it together and such. And that'll keep things a lot cleaner than if I take my brush and I just kind of move it in every direction. That's something that is very, very crucial to learn. Not just for glazing, but definitely for glazing. We always teach that, if you've ever swept a dusty porch or dusty floor, you know how the broom works. The broom will push the dirt, which is the pigment in this situation, the broom will push the pigment, right? So if I have a bunch of dust and I take the broom and I sweep, when I stop, it will have picked up all this dust and left it in a pile here. But the broom does is it leaves a swath of that fine dust behind. So it's like a comet tail all the time. And that's exactly what painting does, right? Whenever we do a brush stroke, right, it's leaving pigment behind and it's dropping off a droplet of pigment at the end. So you move from here to here, and I start my brush where I don't want the paint, right? And then lightly glaze up to where I do want the paint, and it leaves that little, when I pick it up, it leaves that little dark spot right there, right? And so if I'm not careful, if I then go back and go this way, now I've got a droplet of pigment there and a droplet of pigment there that on the model makes it look weird. That's out of sync. So you always want all of your brush strokes to push the pigment to the same exact spot, because that way you'll get the same little comet tail behind and the pigment building up at this end, which is where we want your color. With bright colors, that becomes the most noticeable because that's the paint that causes all the contrast on the model. And so if you have it to where you're moving your brush in various directions, you've got a little bit built up here, a little bit built up here, and you're trying to have it all in one location where that highlight is, right? And that's what's going to cause you a problem. So you'll see me do that on this model. I want a good thing is like across the cylinder of the arm here, I want all the highlight to be right along this line of the arm. So if I take this color that I'm mixing over here with the white, blue, and the Payne's gray, right? And I'm using it as a you know, kind of a semi-thin glaze. Then I want to start back here in the shadows and pull it towards this middle area of this line. And then I want to come over here and start it from the shadows and pull it to the middle point of the line and have them meet right in the middle. And then I just kind of stipple the lines together so it doesn't look like I have those brush strokes meeting in the middle. Right? Now here I don't have two directions to come at it, so I'll just keep all of my brush strokes coming from down here up to this area. And then I'll turn around and on this side pull from down here back up to that same area. And again, where they meet, I'll just kind of stipple around just to make sure I don't get brush strokes looking like I had two lines meeting in the center. And then here, again, I start down in this area, pull my brush up, lift it, bring it back down, lift it, bring it back down. And I'm always pushing pigment upwards towards where I know the brightest color wants to be. And because most of my pigment's left here, this end starts to blend because less pigment is where I started. And more pigment's up at the top where I stopped. So that's the key to making sure that your bright color glazes work. But that doesn't preclude you from doing something like using the transparents to help you get there and find your confidence. You may switch over later and say, oh, I don't need to do that anymore, right? Because I found my stride in my brushstroke and control of the thin paint. Thin paint's hard to control. It kind of wants to go everywhere and blur out and cause you problems. So it's up to you to kind of reel it back in by pushing it where you want it. Again, on the cylinder of the arm here, I pulled from one end here, and then I'll do the same thing underneath. Pull from that end back up, and it'll build more pigment up where the two brushstroke ends meet, and I'll be brighter in the middle here. We're almost out of time, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
3:56.
Wow. Time flies when you're having fun.
She is chillin', indeed.
And then here on this shoulder pad, I have to pick where I want my bright spot. And because of how the cylinder of the arm is, the bright spot's going to be right around here. Right, so I'll sketch it in first. I'll just kind of pull my paint there and maybe a little bit across the top. Like that. And then because the cylinder is going this way and this way, then my bright spot is here on this low one.
Tech Elf, thank you for being here.
I wouldn't have so much fun painting if you guys were in here. So thank you for hanging out with us, as always.
I think I'm going to jump out and go say goodbye to the crew.
Okay.
They are wrapping up for the day as well. I will see you all tomorrow.
Cool. Bye, Jen.
Bye. Oh, I ran over the leash. She's stuck.
I would like to show real quick before we end today what my next step is here. So I'm going to do this area of the hand real quick with this brighter color. And before we jump, I will show that we're at that stage of metallic, right, where I'm going to have to move to a much brighter color to pull off the shine of metal, right? His armor, while not being polished steel, we assume it's painted, right, colored somehow. It still has a shine to it, right? Still would have a polish or something like that. And so we will have to make a jump to a much brighter contrast in order to pull that off. We can't keep going in small steps of adding the white blue to the Payne's gray. We got to commit and do the shine. Because the shine itself, the brightness of metal, overtakes a lot of your mid-tone colors. Right? The reflective shine of the light in the area or whatever winds up making a bunch of your colors non-visible. Think about when you walk up to a car in the sunlight, all the color around where the light is reflecting is not really visible, right? So we'll go back down to my size 3 brush and just go with white blue by itself. So here's all of our palette where we've gone from Payne's gray to this brighter blue gray, and then we're going to go basically white. We're going to go bang, right? So this is a huge jump in contrast, right? It's not quite as bright as going to pure white. Pure white would be too jarring and wouldn't let us have an area to move to for highlight, right? So we just want to do this and start catching my edges first. Right. And now it starts to bring that shine. And then when we get to the cylinders of the arm, we're just going to nestle it right into where we had those other bright colors we just did. And this is the part that really makes your non-metallic, or what we call reflective surface painting, come alive, is when you do this color right here. This starts to give you the I'm succeeding or I'm failing part. You'll feel less good about it if you haven't taken a big enough step. If your color that you're putting on right now isn't bright enough, then it won't feel right. And that will be what makes the piece you're painting just look like, in this case, I was just painting gray if I go too bright on my midtones. And then this color seems like a natural highlight for the last color. Then I'll lose the idea of a shine, right? And it'll just feel like the highlight that should have been there anyway on gray armor. This also makes all of the other colors on the armor look a lot darker immediately, right? So we immediately start to see that all of the blue-grays tend to look much darker than they did a second ago as I put more and more of this bright color on here. right? And I've got a shine here, so I'm just going to add this in. Using this kind of horizontal texture. And then that light would travel right across that same line to here, so I'm just going to make a bunch of horizontal thin brush strokes to mark my shine spot very lightly, so I'm not upsetting the color too much. Right, but that's where my shine's going to go. And that's going to happen on the cuff right here, and down here, and across here. And then same thing here, because we have another portion of the cylinder as the elbow plate comes up around the arm. So we're just going to, again, make these horizontal strokes, all going in the same direction, just like I told you before. These are all going from bottom to top, or low to high, however you want to do it. I'm going to skip doing anything around this spike because it'll be kind of a shadow spot there. And again, just doing it really rough to spot your color in first. This doesn't have to be done very neat. You'll get used to being a little looser with your brush strokes as you learn this, but there's no reason to waste a lot of brain power saying, oh my God, this has to be perfect right now. And I might come back and brighten it up, get a little bit more contrast built into some of these parts. You'll play with how thin this paint is as you go. See, that's pretty thin. I'm being able to see the darker colors underneath. This lets me play around with putting it in the right location, but not having it be irreparable if I don't like it. Right, and very slowly we get that metallic armor we want. And now you can start believing that you can see where I'm going to be able to make this feel like black armor. Do smaller brush strokes, so I'm getting more pigment towards the edge that I want brightest in this reflection. Right. Boom. And now we've got the blockiness that I'm looking for that gives me the idea that, yeah, I really like that. I think this piece looks good from that direction with that shine on it, because this is kind of the money shot. He's looking off to his left or right. Yeah. That's going to make the black armor really appeal here once we get it done. Huzzah. Look at that. Only 5 minutes over. So thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us again as we paint the legally distinct Tiger L. Anthony. It's been great. You guys have had some great questions today, so hopefully we gave you some good info back. Make sure you check out all the links that Chris has put up in the chat there. Check out the store at monumenthobbies.com where you can find all of our great products. The FLGS store locator, so you can find a locator or a person closer to you in your neck of the woods. We've got hundreds of dealers across the globe that sell Monument products. Support your local dealer if you can, as well as our YouTube and our Discord links. We'd love to see you as part of the community on the Discord. We've got over 5,293 people pushing pigments from shadows to highlights in the Discord. Heck yeah, Ghost Hunter, he gets it. Ghost Hunter gets it, man. He gets it. So thank you all for hanging out with us. Glad to see you. Make sure to hit the follow button or the subscribe button if you're over on YouTube. We do this daily, Monday through Friday, from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time here in Phoenix, Arizona. We'd love to see you back and hanging out with the community. Tomorrow I will be gone, but Jordan, Jen, and Christopher will be here doing the review of December's Discord Challenge. So we'll have some fun looking at community artwork and picking some winners. I think it'll be fun. So I'll be anxious to see the replay when I get done. Unfortunately, I have a long meeting that starts during stream time tomorrow, so I will not be around. But I will catch you back here on Thursday for more Le Tigre El Antonio.
I like that. I like that one.
Have a wonderful evening. Stick around. Chris is going to find us somebody to raid.
Bye,
Show some love
everybody.
in the channel we wind up in, and we'll catch you back mañana. Adios, gang.